I request you to take your seats, please. For coming. I'm sorry we started slightly late. We were actually waiting for Mr. Godrej, who was driven in all the way from Pune. So he had a little car problem on the way, and therefore, thank you for coming all the way and making it in time. So just a warm welcome to all of you. I know it's a busy Monday evening in Bombay, and it's never easy to make it, but thank you for coming, and also thank you to some of my special Aspen colleagues who are here today. For some of you, I believe some of you may be familiar with the Aspen Institute, but those of you who aren't, just let me take a couple of minutes to talk about the Aspen Institute India. The Aspen Institute India's mission is twofold. The first is to foster values-based leadership, encouraging individuals to reflect on the ideals and ideas that define a good society. And I think that's increasingly very important in today's India and today's society as we live. And also to provide a neutral and balanced venue for discussing and acting on issues. As part of this, Aspen Institute India does four things. A, it conducts policy seminars that deals with the public and private sector policy making. It's very active with the government and other bodies. It conducts leadership seminars in a limited way for select people. It holds international dialogues with partner groups. And it conducts a series of public programs such as this one to reach out to the broader society. So let me talk about today's session. Today's session, as you know, is themed Innovation Culture, Myths, Realities, and Ideas. Innovation is, like you all know, a much used buzzword in management. The good thing about management words and phrases such as this is they develop over a period of time because there's something good about them, because they contribute to better performance, because they actually tried and tested and found to be very useful. The not so good thing about these things is over a period of time, people forget why they developed and what they truly meant. Then they start becoming pure jargons and start becoming fads as opposed to the original concept or essence that they really stood for. So that's what today's session is really about, is to lift the veil, move away from the jargon that innovation has become, and actually talk about what innovation truly meant. So today's session will aim to distill and simplify that. It will show us that innovation isn't just a pure management jargon, but it's a simple philosophy that can be applied to our way of doing anything and is relevant to every sphere, not just the corporate sphere. It's relevant to our lives every day. So let me come to our distinguished leader who we have with us today. I believe there are two kinds of intellectuals. The first are the ones that tend to over-intellectualize everything, so they lose you in the process. And the second are the ones who simplify everything for you so you actually get the true essence. Mr. Gopalakrishnan, I've had the privilege of listening to you a few times, and I can confidently say you belong to the second bunch, which is not taking away from the wisdom of what you speak, but the wisdom distilled into simple, relatable points is what really makes that wisdom applicable. And that's what he'll share with you today from his learnings and anecdotes that you'll hear. So for those of you not already familiar with Mr. Gopalakrishnan, his list of achievements is long. I probably won't be able to read all of it. But he's been a professional manager for 45 years. He's spent 31 years with Unilever in India and other parts of the world. And then spent 14 years with the Tata Group, where he currently is. With Unilever, he served in various senior positions in India and abroad, and finally left as vice chairman of Hindustan Lever. Currently with the Tatas, he is the executive director of Tata Sons, chairman of Tata Auto Component Systems and Rallis India, the vice chairman of Tata Chemicals, and is a director on the board of Tata Power and Tata Technologies. He is an independent director on the boards of AkzoNobel India and Castrol India. Academically, he studied physics from St. Xavier's, Kolkata, right? And is an IIT graduate, and has attended the advanced management program at Harvard Business School. So again, borrowing a phrase from you, while that makes him appear to be left-brained, having heard him, you'll realize he's got a good balance between the left brain and the right brain, which he's been nurturing a lot of. He's also authored various books and has been an active lecturer. So all those who have heard him, are privileged to have done so. So with that, let me hand it over to you, Mr. Gopalakrishnan. Mr. Gopalakrishnan. Standing in for Mr. Godrej on this introduction. I think he was, after that journey, he asked me to do that. So it's over to you. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know we've lost some time, so I was just amused because I once came across by some august body a conference on delegation, and they sent the letter to all the CEOs to attend. And the people who attended were all people with the designation deputy CEO. So the delegation had happened even before the seminar had begun. So Jamshed is obviously handed over. Thank you for this opportunity to talk to you. Just for the record, I'm not executive director, I'm director. I've ceased to be executive. That is just for the record. I tell you what, I've got a number of charts which would normally take me an hour. Don't get scared. I know it's Monday evening. I'm going to trim it a bit so that we can have a little dialogue and questions. But I must set a framework for which I claim no great originality. But I would, with humility, suggest that it's a slightly different way of looking at it. You made a very important point, Anuj, in the beginning, that innovation is not something which you need to complexify. It's a natural state, and that's the essence of what I want to state. That it's a very natural state of human beings, that somehow we have tied our eyes with bandages and blinded ourselves to it, and now we are having to make a very special effort to open up those bandages and do what comes to us naturally. And the way I thought I would address the subject is by, I've got 5 myths, 5 realities, and 5 ideas. So that makes 15 of them. Even if I spend 5 minutes on each one, you can see that you'll be sitting here for some time. So if I'm skipping some slides, it's not because they are confidential, it's not because they're uninteresting, but I'm just being respectful of your time. So I'll just skip a few of them. So let me skip to, how does this work now? Oh, why is this here then? It's of no value, okay. So let me first go to these myths, and I'm going to cover all the 5 in one go. The first myth about innovation that you see a lot of in literature is that it's essential to be first in the market. FIM stands for first in the market. I will speak to each of these for a few minutes. The second myth is that R&D is the measure of innovation. The third myth is that innovation is more difficult in services like hoteliering, hospitality, tourism, than it is, or cuisine, than it is in products. The fourth is that innovation is about big bets. We always love to eulogize and admire the guy who was a little petrol pump attendant and he just suddenly became something else. And you know, somebody who was on a farm tending to horses and then he discovered penicillin. Those are all very endearing stories. They're all true stories. They are endearing, they are very inspiring, but most of us are not necessarily in that league. And the fifth and the last point is that processes matter more than culture. That it's important to be disciplined, and the whole point about culture, which is a soft subject, attracts less of our attention. We don't know what to do with it. It's a bit of a right-brained activity, process. Good engineers know how to draw process diagrams. That's the first thing engineers learn, and they do it for the rest of their lives. So I want to touch upon each of these very briefly and tell you why I refer to them as myths. Now remember the definition of a myth. A myth is something which is not necessarily untrue, but which may not be true. That's the definition of a myth. So if you refer to the Ramayana or the Mahabharata as mythology, it doesn't mean it didn't happen. You're not terribly sure. So you say, it might have happened. It's not necessarily true, not necessarily untrue. That's a myth. And I'm not therefore saying all these are untruths, but I'm referring to them advisedly as myths. So this point about being first in the market, this is the common way in which it manifests itself. Andrew Grove, who was the former head of Intel, he said the first mover has a true opportunity. If you don't get it, you're gone. You'll be told that first in the market allows you to patent it and then hold that intellectual property and the earnings that come out of it. And of course, the famous Al Ries and Jack Trout, who've written all these books about positioning and marketing and advertising. See, if you're first, you're remembered. If you're second, nobody remembers you. And very rhetorically and dramatically, they'll ask you the question, who was the first man who climbed Everest? And if you'll say Edmund Hillary, you say, who's the second man? And nobody knows. He said, therefore, you have to be first, otherwise you don't count. In reality, very often the first in the market is the guy who's forgotten. And you think of the second or the third in the market as the first in the market, because who you remember is the successful man, not the first man. So if you said, it is more important to be successful than to be first, you probably have a better paradigm. And here are some examples. If you look at the field of computers, which has of course changed very, very rapidly, when I began my career, which as you might have gathered from my introduction was quite a long time ago, computers were just sort of coming in. And today if I ask my son who invented computers, he'll probably say Apple or something like that, But Apple wasn't even known. There was a company called MITS, M-I-T-S, which stood for Micro Instrumentation and Telemetry Systems. Talk of nice sounding companies. And they launched an Intel-based machine. And Business Week referred to them as the IBM of the home computer. And Apple wasn't even known. It wasn't even established at that time. But they were the first in the market. But today, they don't exist. Nobody knows their name. And everybody thinks of Apple as the one who created the PC market. So I call being first in the market. Take the copier market. This is the personal computer. In the copier market, it's exactly the same. The word Xerox has become almost the word for it. Xerox is copy for me. But Xerox was not the first one who came with a copier. I won't give you the list of all the people who came with copiers before them, but we've forgotten them. And the question to ask is, was it more important to be first, or was it more important to be successful? And I would argue that if you're first and fallen, then nobody remembers you. If you're seventh and you're successful, you'll be thought of as the first. So it's more important. Diapers. I spent many years in Unilever watching consumer products like diapers. And if you ask any young mother, or even old mother, elderly mother, former mother, who made diapers, they would probably say P&G. And they would say Pampers. And when our kids were young, when we went abroad, since diapers weren't available in India, people of my age group would have to bring back a suitcase full of diapers to keep sure that the children are dry. But Pampers was not the first one to make diapers. A company called Chucks made diapers, and nobody remembers Chucks now. And I've got the whole story about Chucks. I won't tell you the whole story, but I will suffice it to say that because they were not the successful one who stayed back, they've been forgotten. And so there are lots of such examples. I could go on. Netscape versus Microsoft. Some of us younger people don't even know what's Netscape, but it was the big company in the early 90s. Long before Microsoft it's the first browser. I spent my career in a company which launched Surf as a detergent powder, and we always thought of, people think of Surf as the one who invented detergents in India, but no, it was a company called Det. And Det was a short form of detergent. It was made by a Sarabhai company called Swastik Oil Mills, which doesn't exist anymore, neither does Det exist anymore. So the more successful one is the one who's remembered. And so on and so forth. I have to refer to the last one, Tata. Tata launched the coconut oil. I was not in Tata in those days. They must have launched it in the 20s or 30s. And Tata coconut oil was the secret for good, luxurious black hair for every person who was growing up when I was growing up. One day, in 1993, Tata, which made this product, Tata coconut oil, through a company called Tata Oil Mills, Tomco for short, sold the company to Hindustan Lever. Now, Hindustan Lever, Unilever, could not buy Tata and keep calling it Tata. So what happened? They took away the Tata name and it was called coconut oil. And nobody wants to buy coconut oil because that you can get from anywhere. So they renamed it as Nihar. In the process, the brand is finished. And who do you think invented coconut oil? You would think it's Marico, because you hear of parachute so much these days. But I can confirm to you that neither I nor Harsh Mariwala was born when Tata's launched Tata coconut oil, but it's forgotten. So I've given you all these examples, hopefully to give you the sense that being first in the market is desirable, but it's not. And therefore, people who rush into the market because they are obsessed with the need to be first, very often carry with them a bag of mistakes, which then prevents them from succeeding, and once they are prevented from succeeding, they are ready for forgetting. So you're in a negative spiral. So that's the first myth. The second myth is about R&D. If you look at Business Week, they will say the world's most innovative companies, and they will put a big table which says what is their sales, what is their R&D expenditure, and one as a percentage of the other. And you will find that an automotive company globally spends 3%, a pharmaceutical company spends 9%. And so they create the impression that the more you spend on R&D, the better. Technology is seen as a driver for innovation. It's not untrue. So I'm not here to say it's rubbish, but it's not always true. And you can then lose sight, because that gives you the mythology that if you're in the services business, you can't do too much innovation because there's not too much R&D. And I'm arguing that that is not true. Traditionally, as you know, pharma companies spend a high percentage of their sales on R&D. And they are stuck with some of the biggest problems in innovation nowadays, because all that expenditure is not being very fruitful. Apple, you might be aware, spends less than their peers on R&D. But what they produce is pure magic. So R&D, the way we understand it, so the number of scientists you have, the number of laboratories you have, the number of patents you have, these are part of the database, but you can't judge a country by just GDP growth. You can't judge a company and its innovation only by R&D. So that's the second myth. The third myth is that innovation in services is far more difficult than in products. This comes out of these kinds of mythologies, that whatever I make can be easily copied, I can't patent it, and I cannot call it an innovation because its half-life is very low. And I want to suggest that we think about it slightly differently. Whether it's of a product or a service, all innovations have to be magnetic, otherwise you don't remember it. It's got to capture your imagination. And what is a magnetic innovation? It's the functionality of the product, as it says here, multiplied by the emotion, the experience it gives you. So you may go to a fantastic restaurant, hopefully in the Taj, enjoy a lovely meal, and come out of it feeling very good. The functionality of the food, despite what the chef tells you, might be that it is bindi and bengan and whatever you ordered, but the emotional experience, because the emotional experience enhanced that your girlfriend was with you, they served you some lovely wine, the music was playing, and the totality of the experience is what leaves you with the image that you have in your head. So the magnetism in a service industry, the emotion becomes very important. And in a product industry, the functionality becomes very important. And that's the distinction, but they have to be multiplied one by the other. Sometimes you may find a very good product, outstanding functionally, but it's drab and it's packaged in a way which doesn't attract you. And you can have, those don't sort of stay in your mind as great innovations. And the thing about the service industry is that the emotion comes out of the customer experience, I'm referring to the last point, and the employee's engagement. What a difference it can make in a hotel. We are in the hospitality industry in Tata's. If the person who's serving you in the restaurant or who welcomes you in the lobby walks just that extra centimeter to make you feel special. All of you have had the experience, because all of you have been to the Taj. And you know the Taj is particularly, I'm not selling you the Taj because it doesn't require selling by me, but you've been to a place where the employee engagement looks so fantastic. Nordstrom, as a departmental store in the United States, has this reputation. Starbucks, a coffee is a coffee is a coffee, but people love to go to Starbucks. And to the point where the author Joseph Mitchell has written this book to say what is so unique about the Starbucks experience. It's not just another Udupi place which is air-conditioned. It's a very different experience. And if you read this book, he's got 5 rules there. He says the 5 principles, and once I tell you the principles, they look so elementary, you wonder why you need 250 pages to write a book on it. Make it your own. Make the employee feel this is his own. Get employees to feel that everything matters, every little thing. Surprise your customer and let them walk out delighted. And of course, each of these is explained. There are several chapters that explain this. And so on and so forth. Now, the amount of time and effort, and now the Starbucks is a partner of Tata's, we have some first-hand experience of this. The amount of time, effort, and experimentation that goes to make sure that these fall into place are just unbelievable. Sometimes it even looks like a waste of time if you're not used to that industry. I want to give you one other example, and I would like to show you a short video clip of this, of what we underestimate the importance of employee engagement. Many of our companies, we don't even measure it. Where we measure it, we ignore the results, and we don't do enough about it. And it is quite shocking to look at the employee engagement data on an aggregate basis for India or America or any other country. A job of a manager is to hire people and have them interested in their job, right? He's supposed to lead people. Do you know that for every one employee who is actively engaged, which means he'll walk the extra mile and work for the company, the number of people who are disengaged are 4. And that's completely unbelievable, but true. The latest data. It's probably happening in my company or your company. So I'm not talking of some mythical company which somebody else is running. Would you go to a doctor or a lawyer whose track record is that he kills 4 patients for every 1 patient he saves? Would you go to a lawyer who loses 4 cases for every one? But yet you would hire a manager who can put off 4 people. And that's us, all of us. And so this point about employee engagement I'm emphasizing because it's at the heart of innovation. And we all know the episode that happened in the Taj on 26/11. But I want to show you a little video clip of, can we play that video clip? What Karambir Kang said, he was the general manager of Taj, about that whole thing. What happened to the voice?
First anniversary of 26/11. 1 year ago, general manager of the Taj Hotel, Karambir Kang, lost his family in those attacks. Parts of the hotel were completely destroyed, but a year later, Karambir Kang speaks to CNN IBN on the past 1 year. Raksha Shetty with this report.
His story flooded the news space. General Manager Karambir Kang, who stayed on leading rescue operations from the front at the Taj for 3 days, even as his wife and 2 sons perished on the 6th floor.
My family died there, and I see them there. I can't let them down, otherwise we would let the terrorists win, which we can't.
Now, 1 year later, though he says he's unable to heal, Kang is still leading his army as he struggles to restore his new family, the Taj, to its former glory.
We can be hurt, but we can't be knocked down. We are an iconic hotel, and we will carry on.
Out of the total 30 people who died at the Taj, 10 were staffers, many of them chefs. Now the sea lounge, the poolside and the banquet rooms all have been restored in almost defiant splendor, with Kang overseeing the logistics of the restoration through the past year, often returning home only to sleep. By November 26th, exactly 1 year later, the hotel will throw open 3 of its flagship restaurants completely destroyed in the attack.
And there's no point harping on what has happened, but I think it's important that we look ahead.
Back on his feet and still standing tall, Kang and the Taj are determined to spare no effort as they both bounce back.
I just want to narrate that, that's a very exceptional situation, and it's dramatizing the point. But this happens to all of us in our everyday life. I used to be in India in 1990, driving an ambassador car, which was the best car you could get. And you had achieved the peaks of corporate glory if you got an air conditioner stuck into your ambassador car. So I was posted by Unilever to Saudi Arabia. For the first time, I was driving a Mercedes. And without feeling bad about it. In India, in those days, if you drove a Mercedes, you looked around to see whether the income tax fellow was looking at you or wealth tax fellows chasing you. So I was very happy with my S-Class Mercedes, which I was driving, and I even had a chauffeur to boot. And I found that every time I wanted to get off, my driver would stop the car, quickly jump out, come running around and open the door for me. And I was very touched. And I said, you know, I'm such a big guy that the driver is almost panting, and he comes and he opens the door for me. So one day I said, Masood, don't take so much trouble, I can open the door. He said, sir, I'm doing this not because you tend to bang the door so hard. This is not an ambassador car, it's a Mercedes car. And the pride that he took was a reflection of the engagement of the guy. It was a company car. I mean, he needn't have bothered about it. And I think, therefore, we get opportunities during our day-to-day working to show the engagement we have with our employees, and I think that's a big source of innovation. The fourth, all about very big bets. I mentioned to you that if you're in the business of employing lots of geniuses, if you got Alexander Fleming, Niels Bohr, Einstein, great company, I don't know if the company will do well, but you've got all these geniuses, then you take the big bets. But most of us are not in that league. We are sort of pretty ordinary people with reasonable competence. And innovation is all about a lot of small bets. Sometimes I find people get a bit disillusioned. Say, can't we think of something really big, something that changes the world? And in my experience, real life is a lot about small bets, as the last point on this chart says. And I've got a little picture to show how we tend to take those bets. And they matter a lot. They matter a lot. They may not be written about, but they matter a lot. The last one I want to mention amongst the myths is about process and culture. You know, discipline comes out of your left brain. Culture comes out of your right brain. And we have two brains, two parts to our brain, believe it or not. We might use neither of them, but it's nice to use both of them. But engineers, accountants, lawyers, MBAs, we all tend to be very strongly left brain focused. Everything has to be analyzed, parsed, proven, evidenced before you accept it. That's our training. And nothing wrong with it. And artists and sculptors and musicians tend to be right-brained. Nothing has to be proven. Everything is beauty because the sake of beauty. We are sitting in such an auditorium which spends all the working hours from 10 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock saying, forget about your left brain, use your right brain. In reality, we have to use both our brains. And culture comes out of the right brain. How people perceive the organization, the dynamics of human relationships, and it makes such a big difference. And therefore, I argue that I've got a video clip which I would have liked to have played, but I will not in the interest of time, which is what Mr. Ratan Tata told us in Tata Group. He didn't use the word left brain, right brain, but he described what a nice creative culture in an organization would feel like. It was very different from Tata's. It's probably very different from many other organizations. He said you should be able to get up in the morning and say, hey, I want to try this. And you have somebody should be able to listen to you. Whereas that's not the way many organizations work. In the interest of time, it would have been very rewarding to see Mr. Tata, but I'm not playing that particular video. I want to now get to some of the realities. And I've got 5 realities. The first one is that these are the lessons I've learned, that you must learn to innovate holistically. We tend to think of innovation in parts. People put step 1, step 2, step 3. This is the engineer's approach to innovation. Everything is taken totally. You give an engineer any object. You give him this object. The first question is, what are its dimensions? What is inside it? What material is it made of? Then he will try to break it up. And he'll go on and on and on. He'll get to the molecule, he'll get to the atom, he'll get to the proton, he'll get to the electron, he'll get to the neutrino, until he gets to the quark. And then he says, I don't know how to get beyond a quark. And the engineer then gives up. Or he has not given up. That's the end of his knowledge. Engineers and accountants, left brain trains you to see what is inside this. Right brain people look at an object and say, hey, that's nice. What is this a part of? So that's why most of us go to our friends' houses and we don't notice the painting on the wall. There's probably a beautiful painting, and they say, did you see the Sousa painting there? They say, which painting, which Sousa, who's Sousa? That would be the reaction of most people because they haven't even noticed it. But if there's a Mercedes car standing outside, or there's a nice carved door, you would have noticed that. So we tend to think not holistically but in parts. The second one is that we tend to focus our innovation on what is difficult, what is first in the world. If I ask you, what is really innovation? You'd say, well, it's got to be first in the world. But I argue that a lot of innovations come from being difficult to replicate. And that's also an innovation. If somebody else can't replicate it, it's a different way, it's a different side of the coin. I'll give you an example. Ask any bunch of American or British or any other bunch of people who are very innovative to come and set up the Bombay Dabbawala system. They won't be able to do it. We also don't know if we can do it again for the second time. It's difficult to replicate. I worked in a company, Hindustan Lever, which managed to reach 10 million outlets with soap and common products. And Unilever never understood how we did all that for 3% of the sales value, because it cost them something like 12% to do it in France or Germany or somewhere else. They found it an unbelievable system. It is difficult to replicate. It kept us for many, many years ahead of competition like Godrej, which now, of course, Godrej has caught up. So I have to acknowledge that those kinds of difficult to replicate things can't be with you as an advantage for your life. But difficult to replicate is a very important attribute of, and these come out of a cultural recognition. And the last point I want to touch upon here is this: think biology, not physics. And what do I mean by that? Because of the training that managers have, we tend to see the world in straight lines, linearly, cause and effect. And we are not able to see the naturalness of things that are happening around us. But it doesn't mean it's not happening around us, it is. So we make a special effort. So somebody says, the CEO must lead the effort. The CEO must then get up and say, you know, we are going to have a focus on innovation. We must have a program. We must have a strategy. Then there'll be a workshop. And very soon there'll be fat books on innovation. And the CEO will come along and demonstrate his interest in the subject by saying, oh, what are you doing in your department or your factory for innovation? And that's the way we tend to run. But you look at nature, they're not trying to innovate. They just happen automatically. I mean, have you ever seen a bird which is, had a strategy to fly and which is actually working hard to create? Have you ever seen a fish that is trying to swim or a flower that is trying to? No. But have you seen managers who are trying to innovate? Oh boy, I've done it all day and you've done it all day, and we come to listen to a talk on innovation in the evening in the hope we might do it a little better tomorrow. So nature tells you that things don't always happen because they are logically connected, but the boundaries are permeable. And if you ask a biologist, that's the way he would see the world, that there are permeable boundaries, the number of critical rules are much less, and whatever works with whatever, and so long as the species can survive, things move on. So I come to a very much bandied word nowadays, which is about inclusive innovation. I just want to share a couple of thoughts with that. At the end of the day, it comes back to two circles intersecting. One is a deeply felt need, which may be an explicitly expressed need or implicit, and an effective solution, which may be affordable, it may be difficult to replicate, and this to me is innovation. You're doing this every day. All of us are doing it, but we don't recognize it because somehow we think this is not innovation. So I'll give you an example. 1885, there was the great Indian famine. I know my parts in Tamil Nadu were rocked with famine, and many parts of India. And that resulted in a lot of unrest because grain prices went up. And it resulted in the Theosophical Society, which was run by two foreigners, Blavatsky, and they set up the Indian National Congress, which then met for the first time in 1885. The Indian National Congress was an innovation. It doesn't look like that anymore now, but that's 150 years later, and we must allow things that were. But in 1885, in colonial India, when the Queen Victoria's coronation had been held in 1877, 8 years later, to have come up with the Indian National Congress, which has survived through whatever you might say for 150 years, was a huge innovation. I've just written a book on my family history, and I've recorded what my great-grandfather thought when he saw the first train hurtling down, puffing steam. And it was as terrifying as a Palm Pilot or an iPad looks to an elderly person these days. They don't know how to do with it. He could suddenly travel from Tanjore to Madras in 8 hours instead of taking 5 days. It was an innovation. The first newspaper that came out, the first launch of the rectangular postcard that came out, it created a whole new set of jobs. You know, people who could write postcards, because a lot of illiterate people had to get postcards. These were all innovations. But do you think of them as innovations? Not really. So I asked myself the question, as The Economist recently asked in its cover story, which is the greater innovation? The invention of the loo or the invention of the iPad? The loo, if you just Google the word, you will find that it's a product that has been continuously developed for over 500 years. Because you had to find a safe, sanitary method of disposing of increasing amount of human waste which comes out of population. It's not an easy problem to solve. Even today, I'm not saying this with any pride, but 2/3 of our people have no access to sanitary ways of disposing of their waste. And a great idea has happened. The DRDO, the Defense Research Development Organization, went and found how penguins dispose of their waste in the Antarctica. They went and actually sat there for 16 weeks or something like that. And they found a cocktail of bacteria that, make the loo, the waste, harmless and inactive. And now the DRDO has developed a special loo which looks like any other loo, but under it there are 2 pipes, and you get the waste coming out of one, and these bacteria go and attack them, and then you extract the water out of it, and the rest of it has become sterile. Is that an innovation? I think more people would have died out of insanitation if the loo and the flush and the commode had not been invented. In 1909, the Haber-Bosch duo of scientists got an award for inventing the process of making urea out of ammonia, fertilizer. Had they not done that, we would not have been able to feed. But if you ask somebody, was urea process an innovation at that time, you don't think of it as an innovation anymore. It's all past, it's over. So innovation also has a shelf life, and it has to address this question. So I think of myself, how can I picture in my head if all these were examples of inclusive innovation? I say the first inclusive innovation was a postcard, the railway engine. The first newspaper was an inclusive innovation. So I've created these 3 triangles. The first triangle on the left says what is the type of innovation, and I've just got 2 types, A and C. What is the level of visibility, and I've got high and low. And what is the societal impact? I've got the impacts, the haves and the have-nots. So you take the top half above the red line. You say, okay, the iPad is a great innovation. It's first in the world, it's product-based, it's technology-led, no arguments. Is it got a high visibility? Oh my, you can't move. I can't read a newspaper without reading about Steve Jobs and the iPod. Rightly so. Who's benefited by it? The haves. If you're lucky, 500 million people out of the 7 billion people on this planet. And then you look at the lower half, they're usually value-led things, which are business model-led. I gave you examples, but I've written here an example of Arvind Eye Care. It's all very well known, so I don't need to describe it. The humble loo belongs in the second one. Its visibility is low. You don't want to get headlines and give a Nobel Prize for the loo, do you? But who has it benefited? 6 billion people, 5 billion people. And I consider everything below the red line as inclusive innovation, and everything above the red line. So if you want to measure R&D, pharmaceuticals, yes, you're above the line. But there are a lot of things happening which are below the line. I've got a number of examples, but this has been talked about so much that I would not like to take any more time and talk to you about it. So I do think that invisible innovations, which are not noticed by people until, we can't run a city of Bombay or Calcutta. I don't think you need that to be proven. But you ask us to put up a city where there will be 10 million people living for 6 weeks and 100 million people visiting for the Kumbh Mela, we put up a perfect city with hygiene. And then the Harvard Business School people come and study it and write up a case study, and we say, not bad. But you and I could go to the Kumbh Mela and come back and say, what a ruddy mess it is. I can give you a sense of the number. I lived in Saudi Arabia. 3 million people go for the Hajj. 3 million. It's a hell of a lot of people, because Saudi Arabia's population at that time when I was there was 15 million or 20 million. So 3 million looks like a lot, and the preparations are absolutely fantastic, phenomenal. But look at the Kumbh Mela, it's 100 million. I guarantee you, you tell somebody to design a system to handle that, he won't be able to do it. And yet our guys do it. Every 4 years, it happens. And barring the odd episode, is it an act of innovation? I think it's a huge innovation, but it belongs in the lower part and not the top part. I'm going to skip this slide, which are some examples I wanted to give you. Okay. And just close with some 3 or 4 ideas, and then we would have made up a bit of time. So the first idea I want to give you refers to this much used word called jugaad. I noticed 1 or 2 foreigners here, but if you haven't heard the word jugaad, then you haven't arrived in India yet. So please ask people what is jugaad. But jugaad, we think, is a peculiar Indian innovation. It's not. Everywhere in the world, they have jugaad. I went to Brazil, they call it giambara. I don't know if I pronounced the Portuguese right, the language right. I went to China, they called it Ziju Chuangxin. It doesn't make sense to you, but it makes a lot of sense to them. In software, they got kluge. It's kluge in the German way, they say I kludge it. The Americans will say kludge. It's nothing but a quick fix. So here's what I'm saying, that whenever the intensity of pressure on a person or a group of people or a society becomes oppressive and they can't suffer it anymore, they will innovate. Without that pressure, you won't innovate. So well-endowed labs with lots of money, with lots of fat cats sitting around, may or may not produce you the innovation. The reason why you are able to innovate for your Dabbawala or your Kumbh Mela is that you just have to find a solution. Now, once you've found the solution, you call it jugaad and treat it sort of disparagingly. Jugaad is the ability to find some solution, but you're not able to scale it up. When you learn to scale it up, it becomes an innovation. So jugaad is an early form, like Neanderthal man represents the state of man so many million years ago. Jugaad and innovation are really much related. So I asked myself, I was leaving college back in 1966. And I see, what are the influences on me? I think it was a hugely innovative year, that year. 3 things happened, which I remember. The first is the sitar, which was unknown to anybody in the world, other than a few music buffs in India. Ravi Shankar went and taught the sitar to the Beatles, and the sitar became global. Without any acquisitions, without putting out any billions of dollars, the sitar became global, and it's taken such a fantastic journey since then. In the very same year, 1966, a remote place produced a guy called B.K.S. Iyengar, who went to California and taught the Hollywood people yoga. At that time, nobody knew what's yoga. Even Indians didn't know. And once B.K.S. Iyengar was celebrated, yoga is now an international property. It's an innovation. The third big thing that happened in 1966, you know, when you're in college, you remember some of these things disproportionately clearly, was M.S. Subbulakshmi was invited by U Thant, who was the Secretary General of the United Nations. And she went and sang Carnatic music in the halls of the United Nations. And Carnatic music became global. So there are many events which take place which have a huge seminal effect, and they happen to solve a particular problem at a point of time. And just to show you that jugaad is not something which is just Chinese and Indian, I want to show you one film clip, which is about the Apollo 13 video clip. You might remember this episode. There was a near catastrophic situation with Apollo 13 because the carbon dioxide filtration system had failed. The Apollo 13 mission was up there, and the astronauts were exuding carbon dioxide out of their breathing, and so they would poison themselves. And there was a huge confusion when they found that the carbon dioxide filtration system had failed. So the way the Americans solved it, absolute genius according to me, they took all the components that were there in Apollo 13, which an astronaut could reach out and pluck. They put them on a table on the ground in Houston and said, that's all the parts you have. Now solve the problem. And they put those parts, ripped them apart, reconnected them, and they solved the problem. And the astronauts came back safe. And I want to show you a little film clip of that, if you could play that. Houston, we have a problem. We became very famous in a movie with Tom Hanks. Some of you might have seen the movie.
Well, between Jack's back taxes and the Fred Hayes show, I'd say that was a pretty successful broadcast.
Thank you very much, Houston.
We got a couple of housekeeping procedures for you. We'd like you to roll right to 060 and know your rates.
Roger that. Rolling right. 060.
And then if you could give your oxygen tanks a stir.
Roger that.
Hey, we've got a problem here.
What did you do?
Nothing. I stirred the tanks.
Whoa. Hey.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we have a problem. We have a main bus B undervolt. We've got a lot of thruster activity here in Houston. Now. It just went offline. Oh, there's another master alarm, Houston. I'm checking the club.
I just thought in the interest of time I would cut that. If you want, you can see the whole movie. But this whole movie became famous because of that one line, because that's exactly what happened on Apollo 13. Now, so Houston, we have a problem. And then they said, oh my God, this is going to be a crisis and we got to solve this problem. And this is the way they solved it. But have you ever read a Jugaad book which refers to Apollo 13 solving the crisis as Jugaad? It will be seen as the apogee of science and innovation, which it is, by the way. And I think that can be attributed. In short, innovation is about how you look at it. It's not the object that changes, but the light in which you look at the object that changes. I look the way I look at you because you're seeing me under a certain frequency of electromagnetic radiation. You change this frequency to the X-ray vision, and you'll see me very differently. None of you will want to be sitting here. And so it's not the object that has changed, but the light in which you're seeing it. So I want to conclude. I've skipped 3 or 4 of them. In the interest of time, I want to close with this. To say there are 5 C's that really trigger this innovation. Chaos, challenge, creativity, communication, and canalization. You need chaos for innovation, and we are blessed. God has been very kind. There is no shortage of chaos. If ever you feel that the world is not chaotic, just go and watch one of our evening television news programs and you'll understand it's completely chaotic. Chaos is not something you avoid if you are in India. And that is one great spur to innovation. And we must consider it a national endowment that we have it. Second is a challenge. You try getting home from here, that will be a challenge. Even if your driver is driving you, everything is a challenge. Getting your kid into school is a challenge. Getting him or her to appear for this exam or to get an inoculation, getting a plumber to come and fix your home is a challenge. Each one calls for some tension and pressure. And therefore, item number 3, you have to be creative. And so you create all sorts of systems. You can call it Jugaad if you want, but you're trying to solve the problem. And remember, the higher the chaos, the higher the challenge, the higher the creativity. I'm not saying Indians are better than other people, but since we have so much of the first 2 C's, we are oozing with the 3rd C. Oozing. And people solve problems in multiple ways. You see, it happened with me and my wife, and I thought it happened only to us, but then I've talked to many of my friends, and I find all couples have exactly the same experience. Go to the United States, give your wife the map, and you're driving the car, okay? And you try to go from place A to place B. It's nuts. She can't read the map, and you will not lower your window and ask anybody. And so you end up having a fight, and you don't reach your destination. So what does your wife do? She just says, I don't understand this silly map. NH95. So she just pulls down, she says, excuse me, can you tell me the way to so-and-so place? And he says, yeah. And she says, that's so easy. Women solve problems very differently from men. You ask a young father, what does he do when his child starts crying? He'll reach out for his Google or his iPad or his Dr. Spock book. You see how the mother does it? She just picks up her phone and says, Sujata, how did you deal with this problem? And Sujata tells her. In our offices, we do that. We look for knowledge to solve a problem. Very often, women just bring up other women and they get solutions. That's why gender diversity is also very good for innovation. The fourth, therefore, is communication. They are a very important part of the ecosystem. The one thing that we do lack is canalization. We are not very good at it. The Chinese are very disciplined at it. And I want to conclude by showing you two charts which, Jamshed, you have seen once before in some other context, to illustrate the point that it's all a question of how you look at it. People often ask me, how does Tata's organized? And I show them this map. You see, we are all owned by the Tata Trust, who own Tata Sons, which is actually the father. It should be called Tata Fathers, but you know, Jamshedji Tata could hardly call it Tata Fathers. So he gave it to his sons. It's called Tata Sons. And that's got certain companies, and then there are grandsons and great-grandsons. And so most management experts look at that chart, and they rightly ask the question, gee, how do you manage this place? How does Tata Sons ever get to know what's happening in Tata Elxsi? It's lost in the pile. It's one of the, 155 great-great-great-grandchildren. And I say, no, Tata Sons doesn't know what's happening in Tata Elxsi. He says, how do you control the place? We don't control the place. He says, how do you manage this place? The honest answer is, we don't know. But leaving levity aside, you just turn the whole picture upside down. Exactly the same chart. I've just put a little tree there. And Tata Trusts are sitting at the roots of the company, delivering certain values and principles by which the company should be run. They happen to own Tata Sons, which is the trunk of the tree. And then there are various branches. And Tata Elxsi is sitting up right there. Now, which part of this tree gets the photosynthesis in the sun? Tata Elxsi, right? And therefore, like it should happen in a family, the new shoots are getting the photosynthesis, and Tata runs like a biological system and not like the physics system. And once it's exactly the same chart. I'm going to let you have a look at it again to show you. I've just turned it upside down, and I put a lovely tree behind it. So when you start thinking biology, botany, nature, instead of only physics and only engineering, you get a very different picture of, and I use this chart because I think it's always very dramatic. Can you see the tree again? You want to see the tree again? You have a doubt whether it's the same thing? So I would like to conclude so that Anuj can take over my presentation by saying to you, innovation is what we are born to do. And there is no need for innovation, strategy, thinking, and making all sorts of maps. I'm not against consultants, but we all engage consultants on innovation. But if you can just learn to be natural, a lot of things start to fall into place. And just like if you go to a yoga teacher, he will tell you, do you know how to breathe? And you say, of course, otherwise I wouldn't be alive. He says, but your breathing is so defective. And within 5 minutes, he'll prove to you that you don't know how to breathe. And then he'll teach you how to breathe. And doesn't require a breathing strategy, do you? Do you need a breathing strategy? No, you have to learn a little bit and then practice it. Innovation is like breathing. It's the reason you're there. You don't know how to do it because somewhere in the whole cultural accoutrements, you've been forgotten. And we just have to go back to it. The moment we think that way, I think sort of new outcomes arrive. Thank you for your time. I hope I've tried to finish a bit earlier. Anuj, all yours.
Disperse our questions or conversation with the audience questions, so making it two different sections. So Mr. Godrej, maybe I can start with you if you want to have a comment or pose a question to Mr. Gopalakrishnan. Or your thoughts on it.
So, Gopal, that was really interesting. And I think, I've always felt about this word jugaad, that it somehow denigrates innovation. But I suppose when you say that it exists around the world as a quick fix, but only as a quick fix and not really, you can't, I think if somebody said an iPad was made with a jugaad, it wouldn't be as successful as it is. So on just continuing on that theme, do you think that companies should sort of do that quick thing and do that quick change, do that just to show that they have done something different? Because as you rightly said, competition always makes you want to stand out.
I don't think you consciously choose between doing a jugaad solution and a scalable solution. They are sequences. It's just like you don't choose in your life whether you want to be an adolescent or an adult. You have to pass through one to get to the other. I talked of small bets. So it can happen. There are lots of examples where you have a product which is imperfect. Or you can keep perfecting it for a long time and saying, unless I put the perfect product, it won't succeed. Or people open test markets, they'll put in a product, few things to be sorted out, and they sort them out. In the meanwhile, people will say that product has failed, it doesn't work, and so on and so forth. I call those the little bets. And one day you perfected it. And therefore, jugaad is a part of the solution. If you quick fix it, like your plumber comes to your house or your electrician comes and he catches the electrical wires, binds them up in some funny combination and leaves you threatened with your life for the rest of your life. That is jugaad, and you leave it like that forever. But if he fixes that so that you get electricity for the next 10 days and then you're able to get proper wiring done, then it's fine. So it's exactly the same thing. I don't see this as derogatory. I see it as a part of the solution.
If I can just add a little bit to the jugaad bit, and I have this debate all the time. Jugaad, like you described, it's an outcome of a constraint or a solution or a challenge to which you come up with a solution. And you mentioned about the Kumbh Mela, which to me is not jugaad, but which is great planning up front. Jugaad to me is, you take the other example of the Commonwealth Games. We have this culture in India that ho jayega. And somehow with all the chaos, thanks to our friends managing Commonwealth Game, it all happened and happened beautifully. But somewhere we thrive as Indians in planning for jugaad, or jugaad as our ultimate savior, and by default it happens. But we never actually planned for not having jugaad in, because there's too much of jugaad that we live with. And the difference I see, Indians have a proclivity towards individual, brilliance, but collective non-brilliance, if I may call that.
I don't know. It's difficult to make a sweeping statement about we Indians, but I have found a relationship between the tendency to use jugaad as a solution with the development of the state of infrastructure. When the infrastructure is very poor, you're faced with a large number of problems to solve. How to get to work from living where I'm living in Bombay. It may be a multimodal transport, it may not be comfortable. So you start to think of solutions. But when the infrastructure is better, if there are guys living in Dombivli or Kalyan who knew that they could catch the 8:17 and arrive here at 9:35 and they could get a seat to sit on. A lot of the jugaad that happens in our railway stations, Chanachur Garamwala, Chinabadamwala, all these things will stop. So each one leads to a proliferation. I've studied a little bit of the innovation in 19th century United States. There's a lot of stuff which you could call jugaad. For example, in 1899, I forget the exact number, the total amount of horse manure deposited on the streets of Manhattan was some zillion. It was like a mountain. It's like the Mount Everest. Why? Because there were lots of horses. The horses had to do what horses do. And so where do? They do it on the streets, on an as-is, where-is basis. And you had lots of flies. Each one led to a different set of problems. Now, of course, they don't have those problems now anymore because horses don't drive around on Manhattan. But we still have horses and buffaloes and all those things. So I think as our infrastructure improves, the transition, this is why I called it as a phase. It's like adolescence, and then you start to move into something else.
Questions from the audience?
So you talked about the relationship between empowerment, between ownership and innovation. What about the relationship between, thank you. So
So you've talked about the relationship between ownership and innovation. What about the relationship between empowerment and innovation? Because technically innovation can happen or emerge from any strata of an organization. And in a hierarchical culture like ours, you know, half the problem is in making sure that, you know, ideas are not suppressed. So is there a relationship? Is that something that you would agree with? Is that something you've seen in the past?
Obviously there is a relationship, but I have a slightly contrarian view. If you get into the debate, you may be sitting here for a long time, but let me just express the view, and I would be respectful of those who disagree. You don't get empowered, you power yourself. Innovative people are people who power themselves, don't wait for empowerment. You know, many of us have traveled into many countries, and everybody has the same issue. Do you know that the Hubble telescope disaster of the 1990s happened because the vendor was damn scared to come and tell the Hubble telescope project team that this mirror should be put at a different angle. And then he went on, the mirror went, it tested, it went up, and then they had a problem. You know what happened in the Challenger? You know what happened to the South Korean co-pilot who felt that he dare not tell the main pilot that you're doing the wrong thing. So he allowed him to do the wrong thing, the plane crashed. And it came out in the inquiry later. So relationships of hierarchy, positions, I call them social contexts, exist everywhere. It's not peculiar to India. So if somebody walks in today, it could be Jamshed Godrej, and I say, His Excellency, the King of Swaziland has come in, you will also call him His Excellency, right? We tend to defer to. Now, when social context can prevent you, true innovators break the social context. Those who accept the social context and let their innovation gene wither away are not known to be innovators. So, I think there's a bit of buccaneering involved there, and that doesn't mean breaking all the rules, but to say, do you believe in your innovation? There are lots of examples of people who took the ball and ran with it to the goal, didn't let other people stop them. We need more of those.
I'll just brief about a few 30 seconds of my just experience in innovation before I reach to my question. I will just brief for 30 seconds about my experience in innovation before I come to my questions. We're working in a product company and in telecom domain and analyzing huge quantum of data, and we wanted to branch into new areas. So we went into security line totally and created a product which almost like an NSA Prism, well before NSA Prism came in the news. Now we became quite successful working with agencies and all. Now we did not follow a specific process, you know, as I look back on it as such, but as I see the various books on innovation, whether it is a Clayton Christensen, Ramcharan, Govindarajan, late Mr. C.K. Pallar and so on and so forth, when I try to, you know, advise other people, you know, how did I come up with the ideas, it was more of a natural process, and I find it very difficult to try to institutionalize it within the company, and right from the planning process to the execution process. Execution, of course, is the other side of innovation. So do you think innovation is an inherently discovery-led process rather than something that can be institutionalized right from the idea creation to the, you know, marketization stage? Or is it going to be always discovery-led?
I just want to say that if you take your left brain and right brain and say idea generation and discipline of idea execution, if I give those names, you need both of them. But if I am putting up a 100-story building in Bombay, I don't have to generate all sorts of new ideas. I better have the discipline to make sure that the 100th story doesn't come tumbling down after the inauguration. If I am composing music, it may be much more of the other side that's working and not the execution side. I do believe that innovation has greater resemblance to the performing arts. You're not an EPC contractor of an idea. And therefore, that's my personal view. I respect those who disagree. But that's not our training. Our cultural training is not to be an EPC contractor. Everything has to be measured, planned, and done. People often ask me, oh, you're doing all this in Tata's. What is your innovation target? How much do you spend on R&D? How many scientists do you have? I said, that's the left brain talking again. It's not a cop-out. But I want to promote, if we could, we would all like to promote a lot of right-brained people, leaving the execution people alone, because the company will stop running if everybody becomes right-brained. There won't be any company to run. So you need guys who will execute, but you need a few people with the ideas who can fight the obstacles of hierarchy, social context, and that's how companies innovate. Every company innovates. Each of them has, in fact, in Tata's, we've started the practice of writing down the stories of those innovations, just like a case study. And each one illustrates the same point, that some guy decided this must happen, and he was not necessarily the chairman. Sometimes it was the chairman, but not always.
If I may just add to that with a comment, and you showed us the Tata tree over here, and I remember you sharing with me once before about how the Tata group function is so different. You don't have rules about how to function, or you don't have rules about what you should do, but you have rules about what you can't do. You may want to share more, and therefore, does that really open up the opportunity for innovation, that you just have limited no's and then everything else is something you have to try for?
I personally, having worked in an international company for a large part of my career, and then I came to Tata, this is one thing that struck me. In Unilever, everything was in a manual, and the manual told you what to do. In Tata's, there is no manual. I'm not making a virtue out of it, but I'm just saying that it seems to have, the only manual I have is tells you what you cannot do, okay? And so in a sense, you have greater degrees of freedom. So there is an element of that. I cannot therefore say that one is more innovative than the other, but I just want to say there are many ways to run companies in this world, and I have been privileged to see two very different ways of running companies. That's all. And I always take the example that why is soccer the most watched game in the world? Ever thought of it? Why not hockey? Why soccer? I mean, there's a ball, there's a goal, the ball has to get into the goal, there are 11 guys, they're all doing something, unlike cricket where most of the guys are doing nothing. And soccer is the most watched game in the world because the rule book is the thinnest in the world. It says, get the ball with any part of your anatomy that you want to put at risk, other than your hands, okay? Any other part of the anatomy is allowed, and get it into that goal. You try explaining cricket to an American, both of you will go crazy. There are so many rules. So, the reason why Anuj probably wanted me to expand on this is to say, if you don't have hell of a lot of rules and you're just telling people what not to do, then more people can do it. And I think there's something to be said for that.
You talked about the process, and you talked about the naturalness of innovation, natural way of innovating, and through the process. And you said that one is from the left brain and the other is from the right brain. Of course, both have to work together. And in corporation, what we have seen is process is a little more predominant than the natural way of doing things, which seems to be, kind of natural to a corporation like that. Now, how would you bring in this naturalness in a corporation which works like a machine, really, in some sense, and how one would be able to bring this naturalness and derive the benefit from working on the both sides of the brain, really?
In a nutshell, 95% of your company better run as per the laws of physics, which means set your rules, set your processes, because companies run because there's an execution capability, there is discipline. You can't have a factory where everybody's dreaming up new ideas and no product is coming out of the factory. 95% of the company's efforts or 90%, whatever number you want to put, is about execution, and it's all left brain. You need to nurture an activity which follows the laws of biology, which is the chart I had put up and skipped very quickly, where you don't keep so many critical rules, you minimize the number of critical rules, you make the boundaries between departments permeable. So, it is well known, it's in the public domain, that when Mr. Tata wanted nano to happen, there's a bunch of 100 engineers and they could come to him directly. Now, if everybody in Tata Motors went to him directly, he would be completely paralyzed. So you make exceptions. So you play cricket for the most part, you have complicated rules, but have a small corner for football where people can do what they like. And it is the ability to have both concurrently. Just like all of us are called upon in our jobs to handle certainty with uncertainty, to get quality without incurring cost.
My question is, how do you nurture this aspect of naturalness? With your own companies or whatever?
You know, we've got some instruments we have created. I can't pretend that they are a solution to everything in the world. We created an instrument called an innometer. So you can go and stick an innometer into a department and you get a reading which tells you how nurturing is the environment. I'm just taking a surrogate short form. You get 5 or 6 readings, just like your pathology report tells you your blood pressure, your urine, and so on and so forth. Oh, you get it for free. You get it for free. It's not a problem. Seriously. It's something that we are not patented it. And the more people who do it, the better for us. And it creates a trouble because, you know, you go to his department and he gets a reading of 3.1. You go to his department, you get 4.1. And then that good detergent advertising happens. Uski kameez mere kameez se safed kyon hai? Use Rin. You know, that sort of stuff happens. People get self-motivated. I think it's very, very powerful.
Actually, we are grappling with this, what you call innovative, we sometimes call it innovation index, innovation absorption index, and innovation conversion index, and things like that. At IIT Bombay, I'm from there. So I was just wondering if maybe the innometer that you talked about, yes.
I'm sure there are
Okay,
better
I'm going
answers.
to leave that one for the offline conversation.
Yeah.
We have time for one last question from the audience.
So
please.
I just wanted to ask
Sorry,
a question.
One last question, yeah.
That, you know, now the cost of making mistakes is very high. And in the context of, you know, we just can't afford to launch a product which would fail. So the subject of innovation, you know, how do you look at it in the context of how do we accelerate the process of innovation in an organization to ensure that you do the right thing right the first time?
No, I don't know. You made a statement that you can't afford to launch a product which will fail. That's the surest way to kill innovation. So the second part of your question doesn't arise. You have to expect it to fail. And then you start creating smaller bets, little bets. Prototyping is an example. You can make 50 prototypes, you can make 500 prototypes. It costs money, it takes time. Some people choose to make a lot of prototypes, some people just take the concept straight in. So there are techniques, manufacturing techniques, testing techniques with consumers, which are used by many of us, but you should expect failure. But don't let the final product fail. I mean, if you're putting a rocket to the moon, don't do everything, build all the uncertainty and send the rocket up, because then the failure chance increases. But you know, a lot of failure points along the way when you prototype, try new components, new materials, and then you find that you can do something about it.
We work on a technology how you do all these things virtually. Test it virtually, so that when you do it physically, you get it right.
Don't worry, then you'll also fail virtually, so it doesn't matter.
Okay, I'm going to slip in one last question and then we're going to wrap it up. Yeah.
Gopal sir, this question is to you, sir. There's a film being made in India. It's a Tamil film, and it is India's most awaited film, starring Rajnikant sir. Now, this film is being made using a technology called the performance capturing technology.
Performance?
Capturing. Yeah, performance capturing. Only 2 films in the world have been made using this technology. One is Tintin by Mr. Steven Spielberg, and the second was Avatar by James Cameron. Now, the cost of these 2 films that they have made in Hollywood is in excess of about $200 million. This Tamil film, which is being made, immortalizes an actor for the rest of his life. Now, this is being made at a cost of close to about $25 million, which means a substantial saving of more than $150, $175 million to a film versus a film made in Hollywood. Mr. Steven Spielberg saw the rushes of this film, and he says that it's unbelievable that you in India have been able to do something similar or better at a fraction of the cost. So my question is in 2 parts. One is, you mentioned that it is not necessary for the first product to be successful.
No, I didn't say that.
Yeah, no, not necessary. Maybe the 7th product can be more successful than the first one. In this case, both the films have been very successful. But this Tamil film, which is being released very soon at a fraction of a cost, is equivalent or better to the first two products. I just want to know whether you will call this technology innovation.
Well, if you've done something for 10% or 20% or whatever of the cost of what somebody else has done it, it is certainly to be regarded as an innovation. But whether the film will be seen by anybody, whether it has a good script and so on, is a separate issue. But there are lots of things that Indians do: cataract operations, making films, engineering, design of a car. There's so many things that we do. I don't know if you've seen the first rocket that was launched by India back in 1961 at Thumba, which is in Kerala. There were no roads, and the rocket launching site was beyond the coconut trees. It was put on the back of a bicycle. And I got a picture of the whole rocket going on the back of a bicycle through the coconut fields with a guy with his lungi turned up, showing his lovely calves, taking this rocket for launch. The rocket cost much less. But do you have to launch rockets only that way? The answer is no. You could do it better.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to wrap this session now. Thank you so much for this session. Can I invite Dr. Rashmi Podar to come and just say a few words? Thank you.
I just wanted to tell you a little bit about what we do here. I'm so happy that you spoke about the right brain, because that's really what we try to do here in this space, which is called Jnanapravaha. We've been around now for 7 years, and our sole mission is to disseminate art in every possible way. We teach, we reach out, we do community outreach programs, and it's just an incredible way to see to see some of the results. Is that maybe you need to teach Walter Benjamin and Adorno to your executives, because I honestly do believe that the classic degree of PPE, which was at Oxford, is pretty much what we're doing here, except that we don't do economics and political science, but we do a lot of philosophy. So it's philosophy of economic philosophy, we do historical philosophy, we do art history, and we do all sorts of things. And we have found it really benefiting a lot of people to think laterally, to think in different ways. There is no single answer to any one. There's no linear answer to anything. At the end, maybe you don't have any answers, but you have lots of questions that are posed. And we actually teach them as to how you frame a question. How do you frame the right question without sounding like an oxymoron? And I'd love you all to come and just sit into some of our sessions, because I think it's going to be fruitful for all of you. And this is, again, a typical resistance that everybody has to culture, that, oh, well, this is not something we know. What do we know about art history? What do we know about art criticism? And what are we doing out here? It's such a complete a divide between what is considered humanities and what's considered science, and there's no way that you're even trying to bridge it. So do come and be with us a little longer whenever you feel like it. You could begin with leaving your email ID on a little register outside, and we could keep you informed. And just come and share, and just come in as observers and see what's happening. We are getting professors from Yale, from the Sorbonne, from NYU, as well as Columbia this year in particular. And they're going to be covering things from, for example, politics and culture. We're doing a whole seminar on politics and culture. We're doing another fantastic seminar on utopia. What is utopia? And what do we mean by utopia? We're doing one on globalization and finance, being done by a social scientist. Well, not a social scientist, is an anthropologist from NYU. And we're looking at another very interesting proposition, and that is, when we talk about the romantics, and we talk about industrial revolution, we are constantly looking at it in a very colonial manner, as looking at England only. But very few of us know that there was a huge French Renaissance as well, which had a direct impact on India, with the French East India Company and a lot of the trade that happened in textiles because of that, starting with the paisley, for example. And we're looking at how French philosophers looked at India, Diderot, Voltaire, and the impact that had on France for Indian products. So it's just a fascinating journey, and if you all want to share into, you're welcome. Just all you need to do is put your email IDs down, and we'd be very happy to have you amidst us. And it's really, we're looking at Latin American art in ways that everybody's looking at Latin America now. So we've got somebody coming down 4 evenings looking at Latin American art, contemporary art and practices. So I'm sorry if this sounds a bit of a sell, but it's, I just thought that if I didn't tell you what you're doing, you wouldn't know. And very often mailers just go out and people delete it. I mean, it's so simple to press a delete button, you don't even understand that it could be very important information. Not that I'm saying everything we do is important, but I think it's exciting, and we'd love you to be part of it, should you want to be part of it. With that, we'd like to honor our three speakers.
You that this is a wake-up call for your right brain.
Well, I think that kind of, you know, we've got a couple of, what we did have in the last 7-8 years that we've been around is we've had judges from the High Court coming. Justice Sri Krishna, he did an entire course, he was a student. And he said, I've never been examined and you have no right to examine me because I'm the judge. So I said, you're not here as a judge. So I'm going to examine you, and if we may just fail you if you don't know enough. He's going to be back as a faculty now. He's going to be teaching Gandhi and Karma Yoga, and we're doing, so he's back as a faculty. We've got some lawyers who are right-brained. So, and they're going to be, they already are studying with us, and it's just fantastic. It's just fantastic. Anyway, I hope you're with us, and we'd like to just honor the 3 of you for being here and using our space. So thank you all for coming, and I hope to see you all again soon.
So I just want to thank Mr. Gopalakrishnan for spending this evening with us. Hopefully it was insightful for all of you. Mr. Godrej, thank you for driving down from Pune for this. Dr. Podar, thank you for the venue as always. And all of you, thank you for coming here on Monday evening. Thanks. Thanks.